Hello everybody, it's Juanita from Me Moment. Today we have another interesting podcast and it's Christmas. So Merry Christmas to all the viewers all over the world. And today I have a very interesting guest, Kati, who's here with us today in person, being a Christmas special episode. Kati is currently doing her PhD and Kati has served as a volunteer with a German NGO, and let's speak to her today. Hi Kati.
Hi,
welcome
Juanita.
to Me Moment.
Thank you for inviting me.
That's really a pleasure to have you with us. So Kati, tell us, our viewers, about yourself to begin with.
My name is Kati. Originally I'm from Germany. I have lived in Austria and Ethiopia before coming to the UK approximately 8 years ago.
Wow.
I really love traveling and currently I'm working on a PhD.
Fantastic. Kati loves to travel and also she owns a 1967 camper van. Could you tell us about that? How did you get to that?
So ever since I remember, I absolutely love these Volkswagen camper vans. So when I got my first job, I thought now it's about time to make my dream come true. So I got a camper van. His name is Sir Sharky the Great. It has a long story. I was not involved in the naming, but that's how he's called now, and this is also how he behaves, like a proper royal. That was in 2007 and he's still with me until this very day.
And that's really nice. Do you have a picture? Show me a picture of that. Let's have a look at the picture.
So
that's a beautiful color.
Yeah.
Great.
During my last trip to Ireland, so in October, I've taken 3 weeks off and I traveled across the whole of Ireland. It was absolutely fantastic. It was slightly cold and slightly windy and slightly rainy, but it was just absolutely beautiful to travel around the island and just finding places to stay every night and just exploring the beautiful landscape, meeting people. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed that.
And I think you work so hard and that's the way you unwind yourself to travel. I think you feel better, isn't it, when you travel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. I love traveling, and one of the advantages of having my van now here in the UK is, for example, when I have a few days off, I can just go somewhere. For example, So for example, in summer, I went to the New Forest for a few days and it was absolutely beautiful. So I woke up and I saw ponies around my van. And obviously going to the seaside is really beautiful. I went to Wales, I went to Scotland. It's lovely. There's so many nice places to discover here in the UK.
That's really nice. I think I need to get a camper van as well.
Yes, I strongly recommend that.
I leave my car behind and then change to a camper van. And what do you have in your camper van? How the camper van's inside? You have all the facilities inside, and how do you sleep? And just talk about when you're inside the camper van. How do you feel?
It does feel a little bit like a time capsule. So the interior is originally from 1967, and I haven't modified anything, so it does look old. But I actually quite like it. It's very simple. So there's the flip bench, and it takes a little bit of wobbling, but it can unfold into a bed. And then there's a folding table in the van, and then there's a bench for another person. So we can actually sit like we are sitting now. The table is unfolded, and then we can sit and have a glass of wine, for example. There's also a little ice box, so I can take food with me when I'm going for trips for a few days. And also obviously I have a little cooker, so when I wake up I can make my own coffee, which is really nice. And I really enjoy opening the two doors and letting the sunshine in, and then enjoying the coffee just after waking up.
Wow, that's really a nice feeling, isn't it? And the fresh air.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And it's you. How many people do you normally travel with? Alone, or you go with a couple of friends, or how many people fit into it? So
I think once we slept in the back of the van with 3 people, but it's quite tight. It was originally made that little family. It was designed for small families, so basically both parents can sleep in the back and one child can sleep in the front. So I usually travel on my own or with a partner.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
And what are the places you've visited? You've been in United Kingdom. You're here now. Apart from you going on your days off, have you traveled outside England? And what are the places you visited?
So before I moved to the UK, I lived in Germany and Austria, so it was a little bit easier to travel around mainland Europe. And I think I've once made a list. I love lists. And I think I have been to nearly every European country apart from Malta and Scandinavia. But my friend has also traveled with my van in Northern Africa. I didn't join that trip because it was while I studied. So I wasn't able to afford traveling, so I've given my van to him. And the most recent trips were Ireland, Scotland, and then I've done a big trip in 2011 through former Yugoslavia. So I went to Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Bosnia, up to the Albanian border. It was absolutely wonderful. It was so nice and people are so friendly. I really this was one of my favorite trips, and especially seeing Sarajevo. And then I remember I got lost a little bit and I was in a rural area and there were only Cyrillic road signs, and I thought, oh, this is so exciting. I have no idea where I am. I have no GPS reception and I just have to go whatever feels right. And then at the end I was able and did arrive in Sarajevo.
Yeah, I think it sounds really interesting, and I think I'm sure this is going to be an inspiration for others, to unwind themselves, get a break, from their routine life here. And what's the best moment you've had in your lovely 1967 camper van that you'll never forget? What was the most exciting or some challenging, apart from you being lost? Was there something memorable even now after so many years?
That's really hard to say because there have been so many different beautiful moments. I think what always touches me is when I drive towards the seaside and then I park and I can see the waves and the beach from the inside of the van. That's always something which is breathtaking. And the last time I had that was when I've done the Wild Atlantic Highway in Ireland. This was just, it's always beautiful and I can just sit there in awe. And then usually the next thing I'm doing is making myself a cup of coffee. And depending where I park, sometimes I'm sitting on the top of my van, so I have a better view, like a cat a little bit. And also waking up by the seaside, opening the trunk and then just letting all the air in. That's and enjoying the view. That's really one of the most beautiful moments.
That's really nice. I'm actually tempted to buy one, actually.
I do have to say, though, so he was born in 1967, so there's always a lot of work to do. And while I totally recommend everyone getting a camper van, it is a lot of work as well. And obviously there are lots of moments when I just think, I just wish I had a newer car, but there are not these many problems. So it does happen sometimes. The engine doesn't want to start. Sometimes I need a random spare part and I'm in the middle of nowhere. So for example, at the end of my Ireland trip, there was a problem I couldn't figure out myself. I have a manual that I'm taking when I'm traveling and I needed a random spare part and it took really long, and then it needed to be fitted and I wasn't able to do that. So I had to go to a garage, and that muddled up the timing. So this can also be slightly frustrating, but on the other side I think it is satisfying in a way because the technology is so simple that most of the things can be fixed with a screwdriver. So I try to do most of the repairs myself, but it doesn't always work. But when it works, it's really cool, like, wow, yeah, I sorted this.
Okay, Kati, tell us, you've traveled to so many places, you're highly motivated, highly ambitious to do new things, you love to learn, you're highly qualified. Did traveling motivate you to dream bigger, to aim higher in your education qualifications? Because now you're doing your PhD. Did it play an important role in your life?
This is a good question. So first of all, I did not pay Juanita to say all these nice things about me. She did that voluntarily. So for example, in 2009, I've done a diploma in tropical medicine and public health because I really wanted to work as a volunteer nurse in humanitarian aid. So traveling inspired me to do that. Once I had the certificate, I was able to volunteer as a nurse in humanitarian aid. And once I worked there, I was very intrigued by my own motivation to work in humanitarian aid, which is not only the desire to help, but also there's a sense of adventurousness. And I was also reflecting on the motivation of other people and how their motivation to work in humanitarian aid depends on whether they volunteer or whether they do that full time. So I think it always did go hand in hand. And also I think with traveling, it is a form of education you can never get at school, because it's really interesting to read about a country, and usually before I travel I try to find out a little bit about the culture. So for example, in 2009 I've done a diploma in tropical medicine and public health because I really wanted to work as a volunteer nurse in humanitarian aid. So traveling inspired me to do that. Once I had the certificate, I was able to volunteer as a nurse in humanitarian aid. And once I worked there, I was very intrigued by my own motivation to work in humanitarian aid, which is not only the desire to help, but also there's a sense of adventurousness. And I was also reflecting on the motivation of other people and how their motivation to work in humanitarian aid depends on whether they volunteer or whether they do that full time. So I think it always did go hand in hand. And also I think with traveling, it is a form of education you can never get at school, because it's really interesting to read about a country, and usually before I travel I try to find out a little bit about the culture. But once you go there, it is a different form of education you get when you're traveling. And it always inspired me, and it's very much inspiring me now. So for example, the PhD I'm doing, I'm going to conduct field research in Ethiopia. And this is because I really love that country. I fell in love with Ethiopia in 2011 when I first went there. And then I stayed there for a year in 2012. So I have a great desire to go back, but I know when I go to Ethiopia, there are other things that inspire me.
I'm inspired by your NGO and your volunteering stuff. And I think by doing your tropical medicine, right? So that's where you start into going into volunteering. And I think this is going to help the future generation who are really interested in volunteering these kind of organization. So I think it's a useful tip you've given us. Thank you so much. I think I've been inspired by that, and who knows, we might do things together.
Oh,
thank you for that. And also going back, you've traveled to so many places. So tell us, the viewers, all the languages you've learned while traveling. So tell us, our viewers, all the languages you know, and has it had an impact when you're traveling? Was it useful? Could you share that experience with us?
I do enjoy learning languages. At the moment, I'm learning Hebrew. I think in terms of traveling, it's definitely helpful. I think speaking people's languages is always a door into their heart. So what I usually do when I'm traveling is I have a list of approximately 20 to 50 words that I try to learn in that language. And this is something like hello, goodbye, thank you, where is such and such, because it makes such a big difference when you go there and you just speak English and expect people to speak English, or when you go there and really try to make the effort to at least speak a few of the words. Because I was in Ethiopia so long, for a year, I did learn the language a little bit, not very good, and unfortunately there's not too much left. But I was, for example, able to do small talk. So when I needed to take a taxi, I was able to negotiate the price. Or, for example, I was able to ask, how are you? And then the taxi driver, during the taxi ride driver told me how he is. And then I said, how's your family? And then it was like, oh, she knows the word for family. And then there's always a friendly connection. So I usually try to do that. So I did learn English at school and French. And then when I went to university, I learned Spanish because I really like the sound of Spanish. I was then in a relationship with someone from Croatia, so I learned Serbo-Croatian. And then in 2012 I lived in Ethiopia, so I learned a little bit of Amharic. And at the moment I'm learning Hebrew. So I'm a German native speaker, and at school I learned French and English.
Perfect. That's really nice. Kati, I think you're such an inspiration to all of us, and I'm really lucky and super excited. Since you've traveled with your 1967 camper van, could you give us some tips, traveling tips? And especially now we're going into the new year, I'm sure people are planning their holidays. So who knows, people might be going the caravans or a camper van. So what tips would you like to give the travelers for 2023?
So when I'm traveling with my camper van, I thankfully don't have to be restricted to a small backpack, which is really good because that's not one of my strengths. So for example, when I went to Sri Lanka, I had to carry around far too much stuff, and it was just really irritating. And then at the end I had to, and then yeah, and then in terms of money, it was just a little bit tight at the end. So I had to sleep at the beach for a few nights. So I do recommend taking half the luggage, taking half of what you think you need in terms of items, and take twice as much money. And generally in terms of traveling, what I always try to do, I'm really curious about the locals. So even if it's really enticing to meet other people while you're traveling who are coming from the same countries as you, try to really engage with the locals, try to find out how's their everyday life, what are they doing, what are they interested in. For example, I was in Nepal at the start of the pandemic. It now feels like it was ages ago, and there were lots of expats, and they said, hey, would you like to come for drinks and stuff? And I just really thought, I'm here for such a short while and I really want to learn something about Nepalis and what are they doing and what are they interested in. And I'm really grateful I did that, because the people I met in Nepal were just absolutely wonderful and kind and lovely, and that's something I'm really grateful I did. So spend as much time as you can with locals.
Kati, I think you're a wonderful soul, and I think and the best thing I liked in your interview is that you made an effort to learn the language, because these days you have these apps, you just go to the apps and do the phone does the translation. I'm really super impressed the effort you take in and all the lovely, beautiful tips you've given to the viewers. I think this was the best podcast I've ever done, for this year. And I think I'm very lucky to have you today. And on behalf of the viewers, and would you like to give any message to the viewers who are watching the podcast? Would you like to say a few words to Jess? Because now it's Christmas and we're coming to the new year. Would you like to say something to the viewers before we could say goodbye?
Not only in terms of climate change and reducing the carbon footprint, I think sometimes you don't need to travel very far to see really beautiful places.
Absolutely.
That's something that became clear to me since the pandemic. Really beautiful places can sometimes be really, really near. Yeah, so Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and I hope that next year is going to be a better year. And
thank you very much, Kati, for coming today, and it's been a pleasure having you at this podcast. I wish you all the best for your PhD, and also wish the viewers a happy Christmas, and see you all next week in another interesting podcast. Until then, it's Juanita saying goodbye, and I have Kati as well saying goodbye. Thank you so much, Kati. Goodbye.
Goodbye.